Days of our country, underneath our original government, the Articles of Confederation, Congress, which was the only branch of the federal government, was increasingly unpopular. They had to run away from Philadelphia, where the capital was at the time, to escape Army veterans who hadn't been paid because the government didn't have any money. The problem being, of course, the government was not allowed to levy taxes. They had to ask the states for money, and the states usually said no. The federal government wasn't taken very seriously. It was hard to get people even to come to participate. Even the legislatures who were sent there often just didn't show up. In fact, it was so hard to get people to go that even the treaty that ended the war and created the United States of America had to wait until a majority showed up so they could even get enough members to vote on it to pass the thing. The power was in the state governments, and the state governments were very, very, very responsive to regular people. And the wealthy and the powerful, the bankers and the large landowners and the owners of factories and large businesses, did not like this. And they demanded a stronger central government. And they rallied around this issue that the central government lacked the power to tax, and they said that if you don't have the power to tax, you don't have the power to get money. You don't have money, you have no power at all. And so there began to be a conversation among some that the structure of our government at the time had to change. Now, the central figure here is Alexander Hamilton. He was one of the few people we call founding fathers who were not born in America. He was actually born in the West Indies. He did not have a father. I mean, he had a father, obviously, but his father did not claim him. And he grew up in poverty. He grew up having to work constantly to try to support him and his mother. But he was clearly brilliant. He worked as a shipping clerk in the Caribbean, and he would deal with all the people who would come and go to the port. And it was obvious that he was smarter than all the other people there. He was a great writer, and he wrote all the time. And he would get sent to America to pursue an education by a couple of wealthy men who were familiar with him down in the Caribbean. And when he came to America, he would go to King's College, which today is Columbia. And when the war breaks out, he sees the war as his chance to gain fame and fortune. And so he signs up for the army. But he speaks French because down in the Caribbean he dealt with lots and lots of French captains and whatnot. And so he becomes a vital part of George Washington's staff because, of course, the French are our allies, and Hamilton is about the only person Washington has who can fluently write and speak French. And so Hamilton is indispensable to Washington for this reason. Although later in the war he'll get angry that he hasn't had a chance to become a war hero, and he will pick a fight with Washington intentionally to get dismissed from Washington's service, and he'll fight in combat in the Battle of Yorktown. In 1786, Alexander Hamilton and a friend of his from Virginia, who's been writing letters with him back and forth, named James Madison, will call a meeting in Annapolis to discuss some issues about borders between the states. And at the meeting, he'll begin talking about radically altering the Articles of Confederation. But there's only 5 states that show up there, so they really can't do anything. Now, fortunately for Hamilton, I suppose, shortly, just a little while after this meeting in Annapolis, we have Shays' Rebellion. And Shays' Rebellion, which I talked about in the last chapter, will convince many people that we need a stronger federal government. But most importantly, it will convince George Washington that we need a stronger federal government. And so all the states will come, except Rhode Island, and they will meet in Philadelphia to have a constitutional convention. Now, it's worth pointing out that Rhode Island does not come because under the Articles of Confederation, every single government, every state has to agree to change the Articles. And Rhode Island believes at the time that by not going, they've simply shut this whole thing down and the Articles can't be changed. Now, in Philadelphia, 55 men come to meet. They meet in the Philadelphia State House from May to September of 1787. Now, oftentimes we call these people the Founding Fathers, but that term's a little bit tricky because there was actually 3 generations of Founding Fathers. There are the people who began the protest, the Samuel Adams, John Dickinson, Patrick Henrys. And these are the people who did the boycotts, the Sons of Liberty, the Boston Tea Party. And many of these people did not even want independence. They just wanted to fix the problems with the British government in their eyes. Then you have a second generation that declared independence and fought the Revolutionary War. And there's some crossover. Some people are in both of these groups. But John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington are in that second group. And they all, at the time anyway, believed in strong state governments and a weak federal government. This third generation are the generation behind the people who won our independence, and 2 generations behind the people who first began arguing that the British government was bad. And in a lot of cases, what you need to understand is these three people talk about the Founding Fathers as if they're one group, and the Founding Fathers believed, and the Founding Fathers said this. Well, that's ridiculous. These are 3 distinctly different groups of people, although there are some individuals who cross over, like George Washington. And so the guys who wrote the Constitution, for example, did not have the blessing of Thomas Jefferson. John Adams wasn't involved, some of the key figures. And in many cases, Adams and Jefferson were very wary and unhappy about an increased role for the federal government. So please don't make the mistake of talking about the Founding Fathers as if they are a distinct group of people who all have one opinion, because that's not even close to true.